Hi, my name is Mark Adams, and welcome to the Private Label Report. This is a podcast where I invite you into my office and we talk about all things Amazon private label selling. Pull up a chair. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Private Label Report. My name is Mark Adams, and I'll be your host. Let's see if we can jump right into some topics today that are somewhat timely, and of course depends on when you're watching this. But recently I've been thinking a lot about holiday sales. As we get into Q4 here in the United States and most of the Western world, as you know, that's the time that are going to be most important to most Amazon sellers. That's where you're going to make the lion's share of your money. So when you're thinking about that, the real question is, how do you plan for Q4? What are your expectations? How much should you sell? Well, let's just get into that and let's discuss that for a second, because really there's no right or wrong answer. And ultimately, like all things, the answer is it depends. And it depends on your product. It depends on so many things in your history and what you've done to this point. Let's just take and break a couple of things down. Typically in the retail world, you're going to get anywhere from, 30 to 80% of your sales in Q4. And really Q4 right now really means from the Thanksgiving season here in the U.S., which is the end of November everywhere else, all the way up through December 25th. And then you're going to have a little bit of sales thereafter. But let's see if we can start out and see if we can kind of give you some ways so you can help estimate what you're going to sell this Christmas season. If you've been tracking your sales for a while and been selling for maybe since this entire year, since January, you've got a pretty good indication of what you're going to sell. I think it'd be safe to say that somewhere around 300% more would be a good idea for that period. So if you're selling, let's just take a round number. If you're selling 100 units a month of something, chances are you're going to be somewhere in the 300 plus range for that last week of November through the 3 weeks of December, that roughly 30-day period you have in there. Some other factors to take in and consider. Is your item a gift item? If it's a gift item, it's probably going to sell even more than that. If you're selling something that is an item you're going to buy for yourself, say you're selling faucets for whatever reason. I don't want to think of faucets, but something that's not typically a gift item, you're probably not going to see a spike in the month. So your December may be the same thing as it is in January, because that's something somebody just simply decides to replace, and they're probably buying it for themselves and probably not a gift item. If you go through, the other thing that you have to consider is there seasonality in what you're doing. If you're having an item that's going to peak during the summer, and for instance, you're selling kayaks, for instance, that are going to be a water-based thing, chances are you're not going to sell a lot of those in December. However, if you're selling an item that is some type of kitchen gift item that can be used year-round, that's where you're going to see the spike. So just sit down and really see and think about your item and use your existing sales. Now, if you are just started out and maybe you came along in June, July, August, and you're getting up and running, the safe thing to do if you have the budget is to order more than normal, because you know that maybe even 400%, 500% of what you're doing, because you know you're probably going to sell those in January, February, March, April, etc. going forward. Now, one thing to expect, too, is that most products take a little bit of a dip in sales in January because everybody has just bought in December. So factor that into your equation itself. That's really about it. There's not a whole lot of science to this. This is really a lot of intuition and things going forward. Now, one of the things, too, just to go off a little bit of a tangent, just kind of a personal story, last year I estimated about that 300%. I mean, I have had retail stores for 25 years, and that's typically what I was estimating on, is based on some of my own experience and own sales. Well, on one item, I thought I had way overbought, and to good fortune, I was very, very fortunate in the Black Friday period, Thanksgiving period, where I sold a whole lot more of this one item than what I had thought. So I estimated and assumed if those sales continued, I was going to be out of stock by somewhere December 10th, give or take, which, I know is a tough problem to have. But what I did is I contacted my supplier. I said, look, I'm going to run out of stock here. Is there any way you can produce this any faster and get it to me so I can have enough to last through the Christmas season? And for me, a lesson learned, and I always treated my suppliers well and like people, and it was never like they were doing me a favor to sell to me. I always looked at it as a mutually beneficial situation. Well, instead of the typical time it took to get their product, or manufacture their product, which was about a week, still a pretty short time, but I don't know if he kept his staff late. I don't know what he did, but he got that product out to me that day, and I ended up getting it like roughly 7-8 days later, and I was able to have enough inventory in to cover what I was going to do before. So for me, the lesson learned is have good relationship with these suppliers, because there will come a time you'll need them. I figure in that case, if I would have negotiated him down to the last nickel in price, he wouldn't have cared for me. He probably wouldn't have done it. But there was some margin left in for him. I knew I'd need him somewhere, and this is that time. But I made a few $1,000s extra simply because I was able to have a good relationship with my supplier. And that couple $1,000s extra, that's a whole lot more that I made than I would have saved if I would have been down to that last nickel in negotiation. So develop good relationships with your suppliers, and I think that will help you in times like this when it's a little bit harder to manage your inventory. But getting back on topic, somewhere about 300%, and I think you should be fine. And again, it's better to have too much in this case if you have the budget to support the inventory than not enough. So anyway, hope all your Christmas sales and holiday sales go well, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And I want to thank you again, whether you're listening on iTunes or you're listening or watching here on YouTube. Thanks for being part of the podcast, and see you next time. Thanks.